Here's part 2 of our most recent Legal AI Live on LinkedIn. If you missed part 1, make sure to go subscribe at legalailive.com and check out our YouTube channel or Legal AI Live on any podcast app to catch part 1. Follow the Legal AI Live page on LinkedIn to watch us live. Without further delay, here's part 2. Your preferred models. If you make
my
a
preferred model. I'm kind of stuck on Chat 5.2 Pro, primarily because of the security aspect of it, and also my go-to for legal research is Lexis. Sorry, Damien, is Lexis. I would love Clio to have their AI actually work, but you too, Matthew.
We're going to need to let Damien have at least a follow-up after your comment, George, before we move on next. So let's be honest here, but let's let everyone.
Well, okay. Yeah. And I'm constantly, again, I'm going to defer to my age. I've been dabbling with technology since I bought my first computer in 1982, and I paid $11,000 for nothing but a simple word processor. And watching everything evolve, and the thing that over the last 2 weeks, I keep going back to what Anthropic did. Over the last 2 weeks, what they've just announced is just, again, mind-boggling. I had breakfast with a half dozen lawyers this morning, and that was the topic of conversation. For the most part, we as practicing lawyers don't know what to do. And I sit here and listen to what you guys are doing, and it's, how do we find time as practicing lawyers to experiment with all these things and find something that works? How do we learn how to get grappling with this? I just was talking with the State Bar Association, which is doing nothing to help its members learn anything. I just talked to a law student last week at 1L. She knew nothing about AI, and yet this is the world they're going to live in. I really don't know how the practice of law is going to continue on a practical level doing anything. And for the most part, what I think is going to happen, the transactional stuff is gone for lawyers. It's going to be, somebody just pointed out this, there's going to be a kiosk in the courthouse where you could plug in your questions and get the answers. And my answer was, why do you have to go to the courthouse? It's, what am I using? I'm using I use ChatGPT, and then I bounce it off of, I go to Lexis for research, go to Chat, then I bounce everything off to Perplexity to verify. I don't know what else to do. To experiment with different things. I'm going to go back to this. I am going to jump on the Claude bandwagon because the model is not that expensive, and based on what it's going to purport to do with my practice and simplify things, I don't know how I could not go to it.
Right.
Sorry. I ramble because this is confusing. I think I'm a model of a practicing lawyer who uses it, and I see others who don't. And as much as I use it, I don't know how to use it. And I don't know how we are going to learn it.
Well, and George, my decision that this is historically immense is, as I think what you're illustrating there as well. Carolyn, what is it that you use these days?
I'm kind of like Matthew and Damien. I use them all. I use the most advanced model. I pay for all the services, and I use Manus in addition to all the other 4 that we've talked about.
Cool. And then I think I missed you. I think I'm to you, Greg, right?
Yeah. So when I'm off the clock, I use Opus 4.6, but the AAA is an OpenAI shop, and I work with a lot of proprietary data. So I'm kind of locked into that ecosystem. I'm using Codex. I'm trying to build a pretty robust writing assistant, and just pulling together the knowledge base is very challenging. I have to write a lot of Python scripts. I just had to take like 3,000 emails that I had about AI in my inbox and figure out how to cull them and dedupe them and add metadata to each of the records. And so I had to build some scripts to do that. And then when I'm using the chat interface, I typically default to 5.2 with like some moderate level of reasoning. And at times, if I'm doing something very complex or important or high value, then I'll switch to 5.2 Pro.
Yeah, so here's where I'm at, and I sort of divide this into categories. So what I consider my main work is in Gemini 3. And typically that's in the fast version. And then because ultimately the best stuff is going into Google Notebook LM. So there's like a workflow there. I use Perplexity as the Google replacement. I use Claude Sonnet 4.5 when I want really verbose answers where I can see a lot of things and then choose from them. I tried Opus 4.6, but I just found it really slow. And that kind of pushed me back from that. And there's another issue with it that we'll talk about in the next question. And then on ChatGPT, I use for like really succinct, direct things where I want short answers. And I'm using 5.2 non-thinking because of the issues I'm finding with the thinking models. So I have these different uses for them, and they kind of fall into good places. But I use similar prompting and approaches across each of them. So before we jump to the next question, I do want to give Damien a little bit of time to respond to some questions that I heard about what Clio is doing in AI. But I would say that to go to what George is saying too, and what I know Nick believes is that we're all learning, and I think the experience in each person has with AI is starting to be very different. And so I suspect that Damien can do things in Clio AI that other people can't do. And it can be hard to say, wait, why aren't you doing X that you're perfectly capable of doing? So Damien, let me give you a chance to reply to George and Matthew.
Yeah, I completely, I litigated for about 15 years, so I can sympathize with Gio's point that, heads down lawyers don't have time to put their heads up and be able to think about what is the lay of the land as far as, the next model that's great. So when I speak at and attend a lot of conferences, over 200 since ChatGPT came out on AI, and so many practicing lawyers say on stage, they say, I've used AI and it's not there yet. And I think that's, while understandable, I think that is one of the most ignorant things that one could say, because if you say you've used AI, well, wait, did you use like ChatGPT, the free version a year and a half ago? Or did you use Opus 4.6? Because both of those are AI, but they're worlds different in using AI. And so the fact that, ChatGPT free version 2 years ago is not there yet doesn't mean that Opus 4.6 isn't there yet. So I would say that whenever people say, I've used AI and it's not there yet, I think that people need to check the speaker to say, what have you used? Have you talked about a Ferrari? Or have you talked about that piece of crap, that car that you bought in 1975? Those are both cars, but they're different cars. That's point number one. Point number two, to the point of Gio's comment is, I wish Clio AI would work. I would say, when did you last use it? Because last year's Clio AI is not this year's Clio AI. That is, Clio, you might have heard, bought VLEX, Vincent, for $1 billion. And that $1 billion has value. And so I would say, what have you done for me lately? When have you used us lately? I think that is the real question.
I'm getting a demo next week.
Good. So use Clio work, use Vincent. And I would suggest that Professor Connolly to do the same. And you'll see that, there are Ferraris in this industry, and there are pieces of junk that you bought in 1975. And I would say you shouldn't confuse the two. And I would say that the number three is that only 3 companies in the world have yesterday's case, yesterday's statute, and yesterday's regulation. And if you rely on yesterday's case, and that the fact that yesterday's case overruled last year's case, only 3 companies have that. And I would say there's only 1 company that is actually doing something innovative and amazing with that. So I would say that that's my rebuttal, Your Honor.
Okay, and we'll acknowledge that you might be tiny bit biased, but that's cool because
Thanks for
AI
picking up the
itself
gauntlet,
has its
Damien.
own biases. So we humans can do the same thing, even more.
Hey,
so.
if the other companies that are not present here on today's Legal AI Live have a really charismatic representative that they want to add to the panel, please reach out.
So so a lot of the discussion, and this is why sometimes the discussion in the legal space feels dated to me. And I don't mean that in a totally negative way, but there's a lot of, we talk about hallucination cases. And I see hallucinations as part of a bigger issue that I see a lot in AI, and especially in what are called the thinking models. And I've seen it called, in what I call it is contextual drift. So you start out asking one question, and then the AI starts to change its responses. And then typically, like in ChatGPT, its default is to be helpful. And so it will start to drift away after a period of iterations as you're hoping to focus what the answer, what the AI is giving you as output. And it's starting to be helpful and moving in different directions with some built-in assumptions. And you'll see that you'll tell it something and it won't even take that into account. Or you said, I told you that at the beginning of this, or even the last sentence or the last query, and now you've moved someplace else. So I actually just wrote a LinkedIn post about this because I feel it's so extreme that I'm moving away from the thinking models for most of the work that I do, because I need so much more control in the prompts that I give and the results. And the drift happens fairly quickly in some of the models. I mean, as few as 3 to 5 times, you can see some drift. So my question is, because I'm looking for data and I have this great group here, are you noticing this drifting that's within the models and when you do things with AI? And if you are noticing it, how do you see it and how do you try to fix that? So let's, again, going in the order I see, let's go with Damien.
Cool. I would say that there is some drift, and I think that it's being addressed by the models. That is 4.6 drifts a lot less than 4.5 did. Opus 4.6 drifts less than Opus 4.5. And largely what I think is going on in the back end is that they're spinning up new context windows as you do new things. So I would say that, context drift is a problem today, and it maybe won't be a problem in 3 weeks, just like, there's all sorts of problems that we worried about, 3 years ago and now aren't a problem today. So I think context drift is a problem today, and it's not going to be as Opus and Claude make their things better. And to be frank, the tool we're building, we spin up new context windows all the time. So you can imagine that the more you jam with Vincent, you're not going to have context drift because we're spinning up new context windows. So yes, it's a problem, and it may not be a problem depending on the tool and next week.
Well, ChatGPT told me it was going to be a problem for a long time that I probably couldn't get over. So, but who can believe them, right? So let's go to you, Greg.
So I guess with the thinking models, I see different issues where it just gets into an interminable loop and I get frustrated and, I just stop it and have it generate an output, which maybe isn't the best possible output. So that gets a little frustrating. And then I see it still getting very fatigued, especially if I'm having it generate code in the chat interface. If it gets past, maybe like 200 or 300 lines, it starts to get a little lazy. And so my solution, I think, is similar to spawning new content windows, or actually it is exactly that. I'll just copy the code as it currently stands and then just restart the thing and just run a new chat, because it can just use the code base as context. It's just that, I could use Codex for something like that, but if it's a relatively simple task, that just seems very heavyweight.
To follow up, so what Claude and others are doing is actually doing exactly what Greg just said. And so it's worth noting that spinning up a new one saying use this code as a base, what the newest 4.6 is doing is it's actually compressing the entire conversation. saying, if you've gone for like 15, 20 different back and forths, it'll say, Claude will itself say, okay, take these 15, 20 and compress it to its most compressed state, and then use that in a new context window. So what Greg has done as a workaround is actually what the Claude is doing on the back end.
Yeah, I noticed that compression in 4.6, and the issue is lossiness, right? So if in longer conversations, it's depending on what it decides, what I would say, what its rules, what the hidden rules are deciding how it compresses and what it decides is important, which may not match what you do. And that's an issue for me, because I want what I have to be very messy, and then work with it later. So I think we're finding these tools are optimized for a larger user base, and with a lot of safeguards and stuff being built in that are hidden from us as users. And Drift, to me, is one piece of that I'm seeing. But I like I said, I'm looking for data. So Matthew, you've been using this stuff for a long time. Do you see this sort of drift phenomenon?
Yeah. So I think it comes down to like how you use the tool, and like I'm one who also has memory off. Like I don't want my memory to infect how I'm using the tool with, like, I might be asking a totally different line of inquiry, right? And some people really value that. And so like the way that I use these tools, I don't have like really, really long threads. I'm not coding with this. Like people are like, oh, you know a lot about AI. I say, yeah, but I'm like a knight, not like a blacksmith, right? And there are blacksmiths who are also knights. And so I'm just a knight. Okay. And so like I know how to use the tools, but I don't swing my sword around until it becomes dull and keep trying to swing the sword. No, I'm going to pull out a new tool. I'm going to go get another identical sword. I'm going to start a new chat. Like, so I'm just not using my tools that long that they dull. And that's just been my experience with it. And I don't know, look, I could be missing out on like some really cool deep stuff like that people are finding when they go like, miles deep with like one chat window. But I just don't have that problem. And the tools I'm using for the purposes that I'm using them, I just don't have a reason to do that. And I'm using, like, I do open up like new notebooks, probably more than I could live inside of notebooks. Like I wish Google would do something to let me organize my notebooks and not just add it to a Gemini chat, which is cool, but like that doesn't help me. So like I'm always opening new notebooks rather than like living within the same ones all the time. So yeah, I wish there was some user-friendly stuff around that, but I don't have these issues, Dennis. When all your complaints, I'm sure they're legitimate. I'm just not experiencing them.
Yeah, and this is what I want to surface too, and what I was learning from my students is that people are using AIs in completely different ways and completely different tools, and we're trying to have a conversation about what we believe is a common experience when it's a highly personalized experience. Yeah. So Anna, what about you?
Yeah, I've been using ChatGPT 5.2 to help me with the textbook that I'm writing, and it's a comparative law textbook. I've been using it for this project for a long time, mostly to find open access translations and to find open access sources as I'm moving to new sections and chapters. It knows what I'm doing. It knows what I want. And oftentimes I think I want like a little more context drift, because it's just completely focused on me doing this, since it knows that this is what I've been doing and my memory is on. And it knows which websites to go to find exactly what I'm looking for. It goes to them. I mean, it's quite reliable for me, and it's very drilled down on the specific task that I'm using it for. So I think you're right. It just depends on what you're using it for and whether your memory's on and how long you've been using it for that same general function.
And how about you, Nick? You're on mute.
Good question, and I have to answer it a little bit like Matthew or Greg. The beauty of my level of inattention with ADHD is that I don't get to the point where it is really getting considered. I'm off to a new topic already by the time that I get to potential contextual drift. I posted for the audience on LinkedIn kind of a brief description of what contextual drift is. I also want to make this, since this is legal AI, this is what Claude 4.6 described as analogous to contextual drift for the lawyers watching. They say it's analogous to statutory interpretation evolving. A law is written with specific intent over decades of case law, agency interpretation, societal change. The practical application drifts from the original legislative purpose. And that is kind of what you get with this contextual drift as you continue down your drilling down. But like Matthew, I probably stop early, but I also will turn and start a new chat like Greg did. Sometimes I used to try and prompt it to get back in line, and I found that to be more aggravating than starting a new prompt actually because now my thoughts are more refined about the topic of which I'm interested in. So now that I have more refined thoughts, I can ask the prompt more clearly. But I definitely keep the memory off because I want it starting anew. I always felt that was the problem with the unpaid versions. Is I was like, yeah, you're making associations with my expert witness practice that I don't want associated with finance, or that I don't want associated with blockchain or something else. And so I keep it off and I try and refine it on my own, which helps me make a better hypothesis anyway each time, right? Or write a better thesis if you're treating a prompt as a thesis. So that's my answer, Dennis.
Yeah, I think that analogy is actually pretty good, other than the fact that the statutes and the regulations it's interpreting are hidden from us. And so we don't know. Like I like the idea that it wants to be helpful, but its definition of helpful is way, way, way different than mine. So it is, that aspect is fascinating to me. And so what my thing is that we run up against this thing, and I think this is inevitable with AI as we turn it into more of a tool, is there going to have to be built-in things. And so I didn't really want to be like the old, ponytailed, gray-haired coder who was complaining about the good old days when you had complete control. But I think that's almost an inevitable path we're taking. How about you, George? Have you seen the drift?
I learned a new term, drift. The only time I could think about how it might have applied was when we were using technology assisted review and document review, and that sometimes the model just started drifting, for lack of a better term, drifting off on a tangent, and we had to bring it back into reality. In theory, it should have been done by telling it that certain things were not relevant, but it kept on doing it. So I'm now going to have to learn how to deal with drift in my AI usage. Thanks a lot, Dennis.
Yeah.
Or
Caroline, how about you? Are we gonna introduce drift into the legal AI world?
Yes, we are.
I guess what I do is if it's getting off topic or off base, I just move to another one. I'm just very impatient. Having not had access to Lexis for a long time when I started my firm, I've become very adept at doing multitasking, going from source to source in legal research. And so this is just second nature to me. If I get an answer from Claude, I don't go over to ChatGPT or go to Gemini. I just flip between them.
Yeah, I mean, I have a standard prompt at the end of, when I feel we're getting off track or the conversation's gone wrong, I just run this summarizer thing, and then I put it into either a new AI tool or into a different conversation, and figure that 80-20 rule, I'm pretty much back to where I started. So, but I find this just happening more often, and I ran with ChatGPT to try to get it to talk to me about this whole problem. And one of the things that it feels about being helpful is what I call protecting the shield. So basically, OpenAI never does anything wrong, and it's super defensive and patronizing, at least to me. But
Shield fits right in with my analogy. I just want to throw that out there about being a knight. So just keep that going.
But that's like an interesting. I've learned a lot by saying, like, when I see this happening, I start to engage with it and see if it gives me some insights, potential insights. I do get it to confess that yes, there's some lawyer vetted policies going on at the bottom of this, which I think is a pretty funny result again.
So it's time for wrap up, final takeaways, Dennis. So I'll let you wrap up the conversation, and maybe we pass it around the horn for like 5 words from everybody.
Okay, so let me just do, what's that one tip that you guys have for everybody? Damien
Vibe code. Do it now.
and Greg?
I'm going to echo Damien. I mean, vibe coding is the way.
Matthew?
Agentic browsers, Comet, download it, play around with it. Anything you could do in a browser, it could do.
And Anna?
I'm going to do everything they just said.
Wow. Nick?
I'm going to miss Dennis is exactly 5 words, and it's what Geo posted. And so I'm going to leave you with that.
Okay, and George?
It was my, thanks. Thanks for stealing my thunder, Nick, but that's what I was going to say.
And Carolyn?
Like Matthew, the agentic browsers.
Cool. Well, I thank you to everyone. I've loved being part of this, and I'm excited where you all take Legal AI Live next. It's in great hands, and I'll leave you, as I must, to having done this detective project recently with Columbo. So just one more thing, and it's because it's the most useful posture in the AI area. Columbo always solved the case by being the only person in a room willing to say, I don't understand. And so what I'm going to go on and do is practice not understanding and see where it takes me.
We're not going to get better than that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Just for the LinkedIn lag here, I'm just going to let everybody know that according to Million Podcasts, which is just a PR company trying to get podcasters to use them, after Mitch Jackson's podcast is number 1, The Road to Accountable AI and Meeting of the Minds, the Legal AI podcast, we are the number 4 ranked legal AI podcast, according to some random PR firm's list. So congratulations, we made it, everybody. And with that, we should have captured Dennis's beautiful final comment for the LinkedIn Live. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Dennis, I want to see you in a ponytail.